Welcome to Releasing Your Inner Dragon, where story creators talk story creation. Drake is an award-winning fantasy novelist and creative writing teacher. You can find his epic fantasy series, The Genesis Oblivion, on Kindle Vella. Marie runs a fantasy world-building channel called Just in Time Worlds, and her first book, The Hidden Blade, is available on Kindle Unlimited. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon with Drake and Marie. Today, we're going to discuss, by request, character redemption and corruption arcs in fantasy stories. But before we get into that, please do hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, or if you're listening to us on your podcast, add us to your favorites so that you don't miss an episode. And if you want to connect to us, you can go to our websites and subscribe to our mailing lists.
And also share this with other people. We need the help to keep this thing going. We've been doing it for a year. And if you like the content and you want us to continue doing it, then we ask your help in helping us get the word out. And, you have writer friends or other people in your life that might enjoy this type of topics. So share it with them. Let them know about it, that it even exists, because that would help us out tremendously.
Absolutely. Now, as I said, we got onto this because it was a request. If you would like us to cover a specific topic, drop us a mail at releasingyourinnerdragon, all one word, @gmail.com, or leave a comment on this video and we will add it to our list of topics. Okay, take it away. Drake, character corruption and character redemption arcs. Initial thoughts.
So redemption arcs is probably my favorite type of story arc. I am an optimist. I'm a glass half full kind of person. And so I do believe everybody should get a second chance, because that's very human to me. I have failed miserably at many, many, many different things, and then gone on and done the same thing differently and maybe succeeded. These are things that I believe the humanity needs. We need forgiveness. We need a second chance. And I think that's the reason why I'm attracted so much to redemption stories, because I can see myself in that story, so I'm not betraying the kingdom and being called the Kingslayer, but I get it. I can see myself in that fantasy kind of thing. And so I really do love the redemption arcs.
We say that we love redemption arcs, but you brought up something that we discussed prior to this, which is that some characters are so good as villains, they should not be redeemed. They should remain a villain. And specifically, the example you brought up was Jaime Lannister from A Song of Ice and Fire, and how you actually don't want to see him redeemed. You want to see him be a villain.
At least that's the way I felt about it. I get it. I understand why they, went down that redemption arc. And if he wasn't so great to hate, and he also had, they put some things on there that are really hard to be redeemed from. He pushed a small child off of a tower. He's boffing his sister. He, killed his own king, and I can't remember exactly who all he killed, but he killed a bunch of people just horribly and dirty and evilly. But it's really the pushing a child off a tower that I'm like, I don't want to like this guy. Like, I don't want to forgive him, because there are some things, even though I just said every human deserves a second chance, I'm talking about every human that's doing normal mistakes. If you're throwing babies off of buildings, you don't deserve a second chance at that. That's not something you get to do, you get a do-over on. And so that's why I hated that. And so I guess because we're going to be talking about both corruption and redemption arcs, because corruption usually is a part of the redemption arc because something has happened to the character. They went off the trail. They're Samson, who finally tells Delilah, I think was her name, I get my strength in my hair. And so, she cuts off his hair. Like, there's always something that they do that so corruption and redemption kind of go hand in hand. But corruption is also just a part of storytelling. Yeah. For your villains, for your other characters or whatever. It's also the one thing I really love about corruption, I think, is in the hero's journey, and I can't remember what Campbell called it, but there's actually one of the steps of the hero's journey in the second act is basically that. It's I think he calls it the peril of temptation. I think it's the time for it. I could be wrong on that. But the reason why I love the peril of temptation is if I'm writing a book about Conan, Conan's on the cover, you know Conan's not going to die. Conan never gets in a situation and you go, oh my goodness, is Conan going to die here? You don't think that. You go, oh my goodness, this is interesting. How is Conan get out of this one? Because that's really all that matters, because you know he's going to survive. And most stories are going to be that way. And even if they're not Conan on the title, you know, most POV hero characters survive. That's just the way it is. And so physical dangers become less dangerous, whereas temptation that is going to make you really complicate this story and maybe not be able to actually succeed at the end, that is a much more believable thing to me. So I do love that corruption angle. You know, just like I said with Samson and Delilah, he really wanted her over, you know, obeying his God. And so, you know, that's a type of corruption. And plus she was corrupt because she was actually working for the bad guys, trying to find out how to take his strength from him. So she never actually even liked him. But that's a great story of corruption and the fall and then the rise at the end.
So what for me is probably one of the best corruption arcs. And it is a classic. It's a classic beyond even Tolkien. And it's Macbeth by Shakespeare. If I think about a corruption arc, if I think about a fall, that's where my mind goes. Because you have a double fall, right? In that both Lady Macbeth and Macbeth himself go tumbling down the rabbit hole of ambition. They engage in witchcraft in order to get to a point where they put Macbeth on the throne of Scotland. And the ridiculous thing is, like, he had a right to the throne. It wasn't that he didn't have a right to it. It's that they went about it in such a way that they poisoned the chalice of the throne. And the visceral nature that's used to demonstrate, especially Lady Macbeth going, you know, in deeper and deeper into her madness as she realizes like what she has done. And then, of course, ultimately, it leads to the death of them both. And that's, if you write a corruption arc without attaching a redemption to it, inevitably it should end in tragedy.
That's pretty much what you're writing.
You're writing a tragedy at that point. And that's, I mean, there have been some great tragedies over the years, so don't shy away from it.
Not that all tragedies are a corruption arc.
Yes.
Because like Seven, Brad Pitt's character never falls to corruption, but it's definitely a tragedy. Like there's no happy ending at the end. That's the story.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, I guess, is don't shy away from writing a tragedy. If you want to write a corruption arc that has no redemption, you know, do it by all means. But be aware that at that point you're marketing to the tragedy market. Yeah.
Well, and I actually think it goes a little deeper than that too. My warning, especially for younger writers, and every time I say younger, I don't mean age, I mean time and grade. There's some things that new writers do that always boggle my mind because they're the harder things to do. Like they'll try to write in a POV that's harder than any of the others, or a tense, or they'll take on, you know, too big of a story and they'll have multiple characters or something like that. Tragedies are actually very hard. And like, I do believe one of the best tragedy writers of all time is Shakespeare. And yet his first tragedy is terrible. It's just terrible. I can't think of the name of it. But anyway, it's not a good story. And then he took a couple years off writing more, you know, happy ending stories before he finally wrote his next tragedy, when he really started understanding it.
In 37 plays, he wrote 5 famous tragedies. Only 5. And they're Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, think Julius Caesar counts as one of the 5, and Othello. Oh, I might speak under correction, but I think those are the 5 tragedies that the literary consensus is they're the great ones.
Oh yeah, they're definitely. Oh, Titus Andronicus.
Titus Andronicus. There we go.
That was his first tragedy, and it ain't, in my opinion, it doesn't. It's definitely not a Romeo and Juliet or a, Macbeth or a Hamlet.
And in my opinion, Romeo and Juliet was not his best work either.
I can see that. I mean, I love that story. But
my problem with Romeo and Juliet is the ending, as we've discussed on this podcast, where basically it's self-inflicted all the way, and I'm like, just look at her, just look at her.
So the thing that I don't know why Romeo and Juliet doesn't irk me, because that's a trope, and it's a trope that I hate in modern day usages, and really in sitcoms. It's the most overused trope, which is I have information that would literally, if I just told you this, we would not argue at all, but I'm not going to tell you, so we're going to fight like cats and dogs for 30 minutes. And that's really what it is. It's the withholding of information for whatever reason, for no reason, and then that's what causes all the problems.
Yeah. Whereas,
and that is a trope that I feel like I've stayed away from exclusively. Because I hate it.
And that's the thing, right? For me, the difference between Romeo and Juliet and, say, Macbeth is Macbeth's wounds might be self-inflicted, but they feel like a natural, inevitable outgrowth of those 2 characters. Whereas with Romeo and Juliet, it feels like plot circumstances have forced them into a position where they get hurt for the sake of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is the difference. So, and that's why Macbeth works for me, and Romeo and Juliet is like, I'll watch it, I'll enjoy it, but it's not one of the greats.
Right.
Unless we're talking about the Leonardo DiCaprio one where they haul out the gun and it's like, give me my long sword, ho! That was fantastic. I loved it. It was ridiculous, it was over the top, it was camp, and it was fantastic.
And it has one of the best soundtracks of any movie.
Absolutely.
That is still one of the, there's 3 soundtrack albums that I own and listen to regularly.
Yeah.
And that is one of them.
Yeah.
So it's Romeo plus Juliet, which is the Leonardo DiCaprio one with the guns. It's the first Crow movie, the soundtrack to that, and it's the soundtrack to Mallrats, which is a Kevin Smith movie.
But yeah, so I guess to do a little bit of a deep dive on the corruption process, I think the biggest, most important thing for me is the corruption must feel like a natural outgrowth of the character. You must understand why the character is falling. You get why Macbeth is falling. You get why Lady Macbeth is falling. It's ambition is driving them. They're set up and introduced as ambitious characters, and then, the road to perdition follows. And you had another example of a corruption arc from the Fifth Element.
Not exactly in the light that we're talking about here. So the villain, the Gary Oldman villain, Zorg from the Fifth Element. I mean, he starts off as a piece of crap. And I think he's really underplayed in how amazing of a villain that is. I think the whole movie was underrated because it's one of the better movies of all time. But Gary Oldman's character is literally a masterclass in how to create believable, driven villains. Because, well, first of all, and if you haven't seen the movie, it's 25 years old, so I'm sorry if I'm spoiling it. But basically, the plot is that there's an alien race going to come over and basically enslave all of humanity or eat all of humanity or whatever. And the Zorg finds out about it. And he knows there's no way that anyone's going to stop this because no one even knows this. He's the only one that even knows this is happening. And so they're just going to come in and kill everybody. So he decides, well, if I help them, I won't be a devoured slave. I can just be, hopefully a little bit higher than that. And so he honestly absolutely does not believe, because there is nothing, the Lilu character doesn't even exist really yet. She has to, the prophesized one and all of that. they don't even have an option in his mind. And the thing that I loved about him was the progression of him as a villain. So when you meet him, he's your typical rich billionaire villain. And he doesn't do anything except for pay other thugs to go do the dirty deeds that he wants. But then they fail. And so then he pays more and better, and then they fail. And then he goes and buys specialized weapons and troops, and they fail. And then he rolls up his sleeves and goes and does it himself. And he, it ultimately costs him his life, but he literally lays it all out on the line and does not stop. He just refuses to get off of this train that I'm on. And I loved watching that, because I don't see, like in James Bond, you don't really see like a Blofeld that's getting his hands dirty and doing all the minion work. He's just going to sit in his little chair and pet his cat and laugh maniacally and let everybody else do that kind of stuff.
$1 million.
So I really love that. And Gary Oldman is one of the best actors of our generation. If you haven't watched that movie in a while and you're like, wow, I don't even remember any of that stuff, you should really watch it again, literally just to watch Gary Oldman and just to focus on his actions and what he does. And he's not in the movie. I mean, he's the villain, so he's not in the movie for the vast majority of it. But really, really, really amazing villain that totally believed in what he was doing. And it isn't like the whole, well, the best villains are ones that think they're doing good, but they're actually doing it in the wrong way. It isn't even that. He knows he's doing something crappy and doesn't care. Like, there is no, oh my goodness, the only way to save humanity is to murder 50,000 babies. Like, but I'm doing it to save humanity. He's not doing that. He's like, the only way to save me is to screw everybody else over. And I'm fine with that. I'm perfectly fine doing that. And so it was a refreshing villain, and one that I really do believe is like I said, is a masterclass in studying a really great villain.
So I think that brings up a nice point on the corruption arc, which is what we said, it needs to be gradual, it needs to grow out of the character, but it also needs to be a reason one can understand that leads you down the garden path. And it needs to be a process to get there. You're not going to approach somebody in the street and go, shoot this person, or I'm going to, kill half of humanity. Like that, it's too much, too fast.
Although there is a movie that starts off exactly that way.
Yeah.
Nick of Time.
Yeah.
They basically kidnap this kid and say, shoot that person or we're going to kill your kid. And so it like first 10 minutes of the movie, you're hit with that. But I see your point.
Yeah. The point is you want to go on a gradual kind of progression of gently, like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, as they say. Like you take one step and then you kind of take another step and you take another step and then you kind of glide your way down. Maybe take a few steps back, go, oh no, that's too much, and then it's not too much anymore. And you have slid all the way down to, oh yes, I need to kill 50,000 babies to save humanity. And this is an acceptable answer to you?
It's a famous saying for a reason, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because most people aren't villains, or at least most people don't see themselves as villains, even if other people do see them as villains. It needs to be believable. And I think that's what the Zorg character was. You understood his motivation in the beginning, and then you actually believed that he would get his hands dirtier and dirtier and dirtier as the movie went along, because he had no choice. Like, it was that or he was going to die with the rest of the crappy humans that he hates. And to go back to something earlier, I think that is the genesis of, or the antithesis, or the heart and soul of why I hated what they did to Jaime Lannister. He was a great villain. He was a villain just like Zorg. You knew that he only cared about himself. You know, even though it happened before the story starts, he killed his own king that he was sworn to protect to save his own life, because they were busting down the throne room door. He threw a child off a tower to kill him. He's having sex with his sister. He's doing all sorts of horrible things. And he was a great villain. I loved hating him. And so by book 4, by book 4, when he's now lost a hand and trying to redeem himself and doing all this stuff, sure, I went along with it, but I never liked it. For a couple of reasons. One is that he was just such a great villain to hate. Why would I want to like him? Another reason is there are things, like a lot of people I get an argument with, because I'm a geek, so all my friends are geeks. And one of the arguments I get into with Star Wars is they go, well, Darth Vader, that's a redemption story arc. And I'm like, I'm sorry, if you slaughter children, you can't be redeemed. I'm sorry. He killed dozens of children to get power. There's no coming back from that. He's a villain. And so throwing Bran off the tower, it's just irredeemable. Like, I can't see someone coming back from that. And I don't want to see someone coming back from that, because I want that person to be punished for that crime.
I think it's not just throwing Bran off the tower. It's the callous nature of it. I could get behind somebody having a redemption arc if, they're tormented by it. Like they felt they had to do it, but it torments them. But he literally
Didn't care.
The things I do for love and shoved the kid straight. I mean, it was, as I say, it wasn't just like that he shoved Bran out the window. And I can forgive him for the Kingslayer thing. Arais was mad and was going to burn the city. So I'm with him. It's fine. I'm okay with you breaking your oath. But when he shoved Bran out of the window, I was like, yeah, no, I can't get behind this. Like, you're a villain.
And that's why I hated rooting for him, like, because I eventually do. He's a great character, and I'm not poo-pooing on his arc back to redeeming himself. I'm poo-pooing on the fact that I didn't want to go down that path with him. I wanted him to stay what he was.
Like, I agree with you that some things are so, and it just, I don't really get behind how Jamie went from callously saying the things I do for love and shoving a kid out of a window to, the deep regret. And yes, I know he lost a hand and all the rest of it. And I get the physical torment he went through, which is a reasonable approach, I guess, to a redemption arc of that nature. But
well, here's a brilliant scene of the same thing where the character, everybody agrees that he should fall to this corruption, and he doesn't. And that happens in The Walking Dead. So the main character, the sheriff, whatever was his name, I can't believe I can't remember his name. I've read all the comics and watched all the movies. Anyway, the main character, the cop, maybe season 3, season 4, somewhere around there, because the comic books and the movies are close enough that I get them confused, even though there's differences between them. They're in a prison, and they have made their way to this kitchen and found that there's a bunch of inmates still alive in the kitchen, but there's still a lot of food in there. So, they do rescue the inmates because they were locked in the kitchen surrounded by zombies, and, these guys kind of help them. But then the inmates are like, okay, great, but the prison is ours. You guys got to leave. I don't care if you die out there. You've got to leave. This is our prison. We own this. You're outsiders. And they start that little argument with no, we helped you. We're all in this together now. We need to work as a team because we'll all survive better. And the main prison guy is like, nope, get the hell out. But before they can resolve that argument, they get attacked by zombies. And so they all turn and they're all shooting zombies. And there's this Rick is his name. There's this moment where Rick has this, his pistol, and he's shooting zombies. And then he turns the gun and he puts it to the back of the criminal who is giving him all the grief, who is trying to kick him out of the prison. Literally, there's nothing to stop him from pulling that trigger and killing him. Nothing. No one sees it. No one is paying attention. Everyone's fighting zombies. It is an easy, clean shot. He's maybe 2 feet away from him. And you're like, yeah, you need to protect your child, and he's got a pregnant wife at this point, and you've got other people in your party that you want to protect. No one is going to fault you for that, and yet he doesn't do it. So that is one of the most brilliant moments where temptation comes into play. And not only are you not offended by the character going down that path, it's actually more shocking that he doesn't. Because obviously once the fight with the zombies is over, the argument still has to be resolved. You guys got to leave our prison, but we want to stay here because it's really safe, because we're killing all these zombies, and then you'll have this prison, and prisons are designed to not get out, so obviously they're designed not to get in.
So I think that is also a great point. Sometimes in your corruption arc, you might be setting up a corruption arc. It might look like a corruption arc. And then at the last moment, at the last temptation, the character could turn away. And that is also a great story to tell. That is a moment of pure relief for the audience, especially if they've been rooting for this guy and they've been like, he's going to fall. Everything points to him falling. And then when he doesn't, it's a great moment for them as well. As long as there's a good reason, there's a character reason or whatever the case may be, for him not to fall at that point. Perhaps there's an external rescue.
So with the Rick scene, it was so emotional for me as the audience. I don't blame him one bit. We're in a lawless world where everything is gone. Society's gone. So I don't blame him one bit. But then when he doesn't, it's really hard on me, because I'm like, would I have made that choice? So normally when they fall to temptation, the normal thing is the audience is like, would I actually fall to that temptation? Would I? I mean, it's pretty compelling, but would I actually do that? The thing that made this scene so unique for me is that I was questioning if I wouldn't fall to it. So that would have been the harder choice for me, is to not kill him, as opposed to just taking the easy way out and just getting rid of that conflict so that you don't have that obstacle in your way. And I think that's what made that scene so brilliant and stick with me for so long, because of the fact that it made me as the audience do a completely opposite questioning than what is normal. Because normally it's like, don't fall, come on, we're rooting for you, don't do that, it'll be better if you don't. And then they do it, and you're like, okay, I mean, I could kind of see maybe I would do it too, but I don't know, would I? But this was the exact opposite of that, which made it so just brilliant.
So let's talk about the converse. We've talked about corruption arcs a fair bit now, and not corruption arcs, but redemption arcs have their own compelling element as well. And as we spoke about it, you said it's one of your favorite ones. So why don't you tell us about Michael and the Good Place?
Okay. Yeah, because that is actually a very subtle but very brilliant redemption arc. If you haven't watched The Good Place, it's one of the best shows written in the last decade. It is literally brilliant. And unlike most TV shows, the ending is brilliant. Actually, it's even worse than that. It completely ends, and there's still 3 episodes left, and the story is completely done. And you're like, what? No, don't continue this, because you'll ruin it. That was a brilliant ending. And then you watch the next episode, which is also just another ending after that. And it's even better than the first. You're like, oh my God, I'm glad you did that. But there's still 2 episodes left. Don't do that. Now you're just going to ruin all this. And then the next one was even better than those. And the last one was so fulfilling and so amazing that you just walked out of there just completely fulfilled with that story. Completely done, totally closed up. And that was a weird thing for me, because I honestly thought that they were going to just screw the pooch when they ended the story so brilliantly and then continued it. And so that is also a masterclass in how to really tie up a long series really well. But getting back to the redemption arc, the main character, Michael, is a demon. And in season 1, he's literally there to torture the heroes. That's his job. That's all he wants to do. And so watching him kind of fall in love with his prisoners and start to realize that he probably should not be as horrible to these people as as he is. And then by the end of it, he literally is risking his entire life, his entire soul, his entire being to save them. And then it's just a beautiful, and again, I'm not going to ruin it, but the ending for the Michael story arc is just beautiful and heart-wrenching. And like, it's the ultimate redemption arc, because you go from a demon who tortures people and loves it, like he actually enjoys doing that, to, you know, a character who is 100% different. And especially, I think the thing that I loved about Ted Dansing's performance was I felt Michael's emotions growing. There was a time, like, when, at the kind of towards season 2, where he starts having this, and it's almost like he's a 3-year-old. Like, you can see, oh wow, this 3-year-old is starting to understand life. And then he's 5, and then he's 7, and like, there's this time where he thinks he screwed up, and he thought he got everyone killed, and they show up, and he literally is just crying, and just like an 8-year-old girl, like, oh my God, I thought I did all this stuff. And it's literally just this brilliant growth arc of finding humanity, finding what it means to be compassionate and caring and everything else, because those are completely foreign concept to this character in the beginning. And so I really, really, really love how they did the Michael character.
I mean, we've spoken, like, The Good Place starts with the character already in a fallen, in a corrupted state. But you can tell a story where you go from a neutral state to a corrupted state and then pick it up with a redemption arc. And I think the example there is a good example. There is Loki from the Marvel Universe. When you meet Loki, he is Odin's son. Now, I would just like to say at this point that the way that Odin was done in the Marvel Universe is a masterclass on how to turn your son into a villain. Yep. 100%. Because,
but I mean, that's even, if you read Greek mythology, it's kind of the same way too.
Absolutely, because Odin literally played those two boys off against each other with his, like, one of you's going to get the throne, and it's not going to be you, Loki. Like, seriously, dude.
I feel like that's was probably a lot more prevalent in humans past. I don't feel like a lot of parents treat their children much, much differently, but definitely I can see how in the olden days, your children, the reason why you had 12 children is because you needed them to actually do stuff. And so the ones that couldn't do stuff, they were worthless. Why did I even have you? You're just a mouth to feed now. And it's why Spartans used to leave babies out in the snow. But it's still a human trope. It's still a thematic element. So I think it fits with the Norse mythology, and it probably was very pertinent to the people of that time, way more than it is for us. But you're right. It's a 100%. Odin created Loki.
And that is one of the reasons why Loki's fall also works. Like, when Loki takes the decision to side with his biological father, and he, embraces it, and you can see where he's coming from. Like, I wouldn't have made the same choices, I don't think. But then I wasn't told by, my mother that I'm lesser to my sister. And, my sister didn't treat me like a lesser attachment.
At least in the MCU, I don't think Thor ever treated Loki. I think that's the
right at the beginning of the Thor movie, Thor was very, I won't say that he treated him as lesser, but he was very dismissive.
And I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why he changed that is because he saw how much damage it was doing to his brother, who he actually loved as a brother.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? Between Odin's cruelty and Thor's carelessness, you understand why Loki fell. You get it.
But you also understand why he redeems himself, because of Thor's love for him and going out of his way to go, holy crap, we've really done a disservice here. What do I got to do to help you? And Thor does break rules that he shouldn't break for Loki. And they usually cost him dearly because Loki really, and I think the thing that I love about that, and they've done the stupid multiple Marvel universes in the MCU, which I don't think they should have done, because it becomes really confusing for the average users, because Loki dies in a brilliant way, and then Loki is on another whole quest later in his life doing something else, but they're like, oh, but this is a different universe. That one happened in that universe. This one happened in this universe, which comic fans can kind of follow, but the mass market public, I just don't think that was a smart idea. But anyway,
even if you could follow it, even if you could easily follow it, I still don't think it's a good idea, because I think it removes a lot of the urgency in the storytelling. Because somewhere in some universe it went right.
Right.
And I think I'm always I'm not saying never do multiple universes, but if you're going to do multiple universes, make sure that I'm invested, really invested in at least one of them.
And please, for all that is good in this world, make sure that the evil version of your character has a mustache. They did it right in Star Wars. Spock had a mustache. Kirk had a mustache. Bones had a. They knew. They understood. You have to do that. That was sarcasm. If you're listening on the podcast and not watching us laugh at my stupidity, I mean they did, which was stupid, but it's just funny. But yeah, I mean that. So going back to the Loki thing, the other reason why I feel like the TV show Loki hurt the character arc is because, so throughout the entire thing, Loki's like, oh, I am actually going to change. You've actually changed me, brother. And now I'm going to screw you over. And then it's like, oh, I've changed again. I'm definitely, and now I'm going to screw you over. And when he dies, he literally is trying to save Thor. He literally is like, I will die if it means saving him, because he's done so much for me. And that is such a massive change from where he's going. And also the beautiful thing about it is it actually puts truth to all the times he screwed over Thor, because he was doing it right until there was that moment where it wouldn't be as bad for everybody else, but it would be better for him. So, because he never did anything that would just kill Thor, but he did take advantage of the situation to promote himself. And so that, I think that put truth to that. Like when it came down to all these false, I'm going to redeem myself moments, when it came down to the moment that there is no way out, there is either your brother dies or you die. Him dying for that, I think literally makes that story arc just brilliant, because Thor wasn't going to die in any of the other ones. And so he didn't make the ultimate sacrifice. He did end up, kind of screwing him over for something that was better for him. But at the end, with Thanos, he has no choice. There is no out. So although the out is he can kill Thanos, which he tries to do and fails miserably. So I think that's the reason why that redemption arc is so powerful. And the reason why I hated that they continued that character on.
Sometimes your redemption arc requires that the character dies at the end. Mm-hmm. And if the character is dead, leave them dead. If they have died as the result of a redemption arc, leave them dead. No shenanigans. Don't do that. They died to redeem themselves.
And that's actually what I was about to say when I said that is one thing that I always hate, and I've always been very upfront with. There is no resurrection in anything that I do. Even though I write magical worlds with all this crazy stuff, that was a really interesting conversation when I was negotiating with Sony to be the lead fiction writer for EverQuest Next. In one of the initial meetings, we sat down and they were like, okay, one of the topics we want to find out how you're going to handle is how are you going to handle respawning? Because, MMO, you die, you just respawn. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's not happening in the pros. And they're like, well, we want to showcase the game. And like, yeah, but it's not happening in the pros. If I kill a character in the pros, they are dead. They're dead. And the biggest reason why I'm such a believer in this is if you take death off the table as the ultimate end, then nothing matters. Like nothing you throw at the audience at that point. They're going to be like, well, I mean, he can overcome death. So he can overcome the loss of this, or he can overcome the loss of that. Or it's sort of like, Luke Skywalker getting his hand chopped off. And yet before the movie's even over, he has a new hand. Like, why even have him chop his hand off if it literally costs him nothing? At least with Jamie and also Rand al'Thor from the Wheel of Time series, both of them lose their sword hand, and both of them suffer for a long, long time not having a hand. You know, their on hand, their dominant hand. Not in Star Wars though. It was like, didn't really matter. And so that's the way I feel about death. And so I think my fans know at this point that if you're reading and I kill somebody, you just need to weep for them because they are never coming back. Unless I do think that you can occasionally use the soap opera trick, which is no body, no death.
Habeas corpses.
You don't see the corpse, they might not be dead. So I do think that that's a legitimate way to do it. But usually when one of my characters dies, you're actually watching the scene of them getting ripped to shreds and dying, and you're looking at their bloody corpse when the scene is over.
If somebody says the corpse, if somebody says like the person died, chances are they're probably still alive. If you haven't seen them die. That being said, I just want to quickly backtrack. You can do multiple universes, right? But because I've actually read a story that's not published yet that actually did it well, but they foreshadowed that there's multiple universes. They only introduced 2, and they made you care. You can do it, but you need to be careful with it. And I think what Marvel's done with it is they've gone for the cool factor without considering the story factor. Like, that's my opinion of the current Marvel mess with the timeline. And I don't think it's going to lead anywhere good, is my opinion.
Well, so I do have an example also of them doing it well. Now, I'm going to say this with a caveat. My life is very strange because there's a hard division in my life. There was a person that I was before 2006 and the person that I was after 2006. And it's called pre-Drake and post-Drake. So everything that I've looked at and done and everything on this journey of all the stuff that I've learned, I now look at stories completely different, and everything that I do is very, very different. Whereas before 2006, I was a fan. And so I looked at the world through that lens, and I wasn't as critical as I am now. So the caveat is this is a review from pre-Drake times. So while I remember it was really good, if I watch it now, maybe it isn't. But we'll just go with it. But it's Jet Li made a movie of multiverse called The One. And I have not seen it in 20 years. It came out in 2021 or 2001. And that's probably when I saw it because I'm a huge Jet Li fan. So is my wife. So we probably saw it at the theater when it came out. But basically, it's a story that you actually gain power if you kill the other one of you in the other universes. So it's this one rogue Jet Li just going from universe to universe to universe, killing Jet Lis. And then, of course, the hero is Jet Li, who has to stop Jet Li from killing Jet Lis. So, but I want to say I remember that they did it really, really, really well. Like there was no, like, Time Cop was a good movie for a fan, horrible movie from a continuity standpoint. It's just so riddled with holes that it's not even funny. If you actually try and break that movie down, it makes no sense. So you have to turn that off and just go with your, suspension of disbelief. But I want to say The One, and now I'm going to watch it again. I'm going to have to watch it sometime this week because, again, I'm a huge Jet Li fan, and I just realized I haven't seen this movie in like 20 years. But that's something that I would recommend if you're looking at multiple universes. I think my pre-Drake memory is that they did a really good job with it.
So I think that, we need to emphasize that when we say things on the podcast, like you should be careful of multiverse, doing a multiverse, we mean you should be careful. Like, there are pitfalls, there are dragons lurk in these here depths, and you should be careful, not that you shouldn't do it.
Right. Yeah. So what I tell my students all the time, to go to the opposite side of that, to go to the student side of that, because inevitably this happens with every group in the beginning, and then I bitch slap them and they stop. but they will ask me, so can I write blah? Can I write a multi-universe story? Can I write a gay transvestite who stutters and only has one eye? Like and so what I always say is, don't ask me, can I write questions? Because the answer is always yes. You can write anything you want. The answer is yes. That's not the question to ask. The question is not, can I write a multi-universe story? It's, do I have the skill to make everyone enjoy this multi-universe story that I'm writing? Like, that's really the question that you need to ask yourself. So when I tell students, you really should try to write, like, especially in the beginning, you should only be writing in, and this is going to cause some controversy, but you should only be writing in third person past tense in the beginning of your career. First person is the one that shows a completely immature writer, because that's the way we tell stories when we talk. And so a lot of new writers will just fall into first person because that's the only way they've ever told stories. But it's actually harder to write first person and pull it off than it is to write third person and pull it off. So it's not that third person is better and you should never write in first person. That's not what I'm saying. It's that you're putting yourself behind the 8-ball, starting with that. Same thing, a lot of new writers, especially, and it's not so much anymore, but when Hunger Games came out and that other YA one, that was
present tense.
Yeah.
Be careful of present tense.
Yep. And so everybody started writing in first person present tense, and that is such a terrible POV to write in.
It's hard to write in, and like I, as a reader, I read present. I'm on the first page and I read in some present tense. I'm like, ish. Yeah. Unless you've done it really well, I put the book down at that point and I don't pick it back up.
And I think Susan Collins did it really well. I think
if you can do it really well, fantastic. But it takes skill to write present tense, like skill.
Yeah, no, well, it takes skill to write anything. I just think I think more people are going to have trouble, not going to have, but I think more people have trouble really mastering first person over third person. And so starting in third person, but it's the same thing we talked about tragedies. Don't start your first story off as a tragedy. Tragedies are very difficult. Andronicus Titus was, I think, Shakespeare's 6th or 7th play that he wrote. So he had already had some time and grade, some success in learning this stuff. And it, in my opinion, is a terrible story. And then he went back to writing, feel-good stories for, several more before he dipped a toe back into the tragedy world. Because again, that's a very hard plot to pull off and satisfy the audience. That's the key. And I think that's the thing that people miss. They're like, what do you mean? I can write a tragedy. I'll just have bad things happen to the character and then he dies. That's easy. And like, yes, it is. The hard part is it has to be satisfying to the audience. Like, 7 works because you're fulfilled at the end of that horrible tragedy. Same thing with, Hamlet, in my opinion, or whatever. So when we're saying these things of, caution or don't start here or whatever, this is just advice so that you can start with stuff that are either easier to master before you get into, then you start building your repertoire. So that's what I think is the most important part. But you're right. Everything we're saying is literally just opinions. This whole podcast is an opinion. You can think that Darth Vader is the best redemption arc story ever made. I would disagree with you, but you can agree with, you can say that all you want.
I will fight you on that point because I don't think that Darth Vader is a redemption arc.
Oh, it is. It's just one of the weak ones that exists.
It's a corruption arc, but I don't think that Darth Vader redeemed himself.
The writers do. George Lucas does. Yeah. Because at the end, he chose his blood son over his boss. Yeah. I feel like even Hitler would choose his blood son over another person, even if his son was on the other side of the war than he is. Switching sides to save your child at the very end, I don't really feel is redeeming enough to call it a redemption arc. But fans of Star Wars, and because I've had this argument a million times, fans of Star Wars do believe that they're like, no, he redeemed himself. He literally is now a good guy. No, he's not.
I am a Star Wars fan. right? I do like Star Wars, but I don't believe that Darth Vader redeemed himself. I think he got a gimme, but then I don't think the Jedi are automatically the good guys.
Right.
I think that Jedi and Sith are two sides of a coin called drawing on your emotions versus control, and both of them can be evil. Like, you can be beautifully in control of every emotion and still do horrendously evil things.
100%.
So
that dips back into the writing very amazing, realistic villains.
yeah.
So
corruption and redemption. Final thoughts.
Redemption arcs are also a little harder. Feel good stories are, where the hero just saves the princess, whatever trope you want to use. Those are where I will always recommend people start, just because they are easier to pull off and easier to make them actually impact the audience, which is what you're trying to learn in the beginning. So, but I love a redemption arc. Almost everything that I do has some type of redemption in it. Mostly because, like I said at the beginning of this, I feel like I fail all the time and I have to redeem myself all the time. So that's very important to me as a human being. So it resonates with me. And then Temptations, I still feel that's one of the best plot devices, because it doesn't stop the story. If you kill a character, it stops their story. If they fall to temptation and go down the wrong path, and now they have to fight their way back to get back on the right path, that is, well, I mean, this is one that's completely off screen, going back to Star Wars. Han Solo. Han Solo falls to corruption. Look, kid, I don't care about your war. I'm out of here. I'm going to go pay my debts, and I'm going to go drink Mai Tais on the beach somewhere. And then off screen somewhere, he has a conversation with himself where he's like, man, I don't want these people to die. I really should probably do this stuff. And all off screen. But he had to have that conversation to come back and actually get back into that war. So he redeemed himself, even though no one even talks about that. Because it's completely off screen. So he fell to temptation and then had to, got himself back. And so there's so much more drama in them because of the fact that audiences have no idea if you're actually going to let the character take that temptation or not, because it doesn't end the story either way.
I think that it is important in both cases, both corruption and redemption, that it feels earned.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 steps forward, 1 step back, shy here, maybe fall to temptation here, maybe recover here. It needs to be an earned process to reach the point where,
just like a feel-good story, the hero has to earn the win at the end too.
Absolutely.
Before we go, I didn't talk about this the whole time, but I'm going to throw it out there. Probably one of the best redemption story arcs. That's what I would call a chick flick, and it's amazing, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Paul Rudd in The Fundamentals of Caring. And I don't like talking about the movie because it is so brilliant. You should not walk into that movie with anything. You should, because everything is so painful when you're living through it. And it is a redemption arc. The character literally has to redeem himself. That's all it is. And what has already happened, the bad things already happened before the movie even started. So you're not a part of that. You're just picking up where he's literally at the bottom of everything. And he realizes he has to punish himself. And so that's really where it starts, is he's going to punish himself for what he's done. And that road leads him to realizing that he can be redeemed, that he can find forgiveness. And by forgiveness, I mean, because there's only one person that can forgive him for what he did, and that's him. There is no one else that can forgive him. And so watching his character grow from a person who hates himself to the nth degree and will never forgive himself, to at the end of the movie where he actually finds that humanity and that love and just the sheer beauty of the world and forgives himself for it. It is an amazing redemption arc, because it's one of the only movies that I know of where the characters redeeming themselves from themselves. So, all the others, they're redeeming themselves. Sure, they did something stupid, but it affected other people or whatever. Highly recommend, if you haven't watched it, grab a box of Kleenexes and sit down and watch The Fundamentals of Caring, because you'll cry your eyes out, but it is amazing. It's an amazing movie.
And we will see you soon for another
Bye.
episode.
Hey guys, Drake here. Thank you so much for listening to Releasing Your Inner Dragon podcast. I hope you're getting a ton of information and maybe even some nuggets of gold that you can take into your own writing to help you on your journey of story creation. A couple things I want to throw at you. First of all, for the first time in years, I am opening myself up to being a private mentor again. If you would like for me to work with you to improve your writing right now, reach out to me. You can either go to my website, maxwellalexanderdrake.com, and send me a contact form, or just email me at author@maxadrake.com. Also, as many of you may know, I've been out of the novel game for quite a few years. I was the lead fiction writer for EverQuest Next from Sony. I've been in the movie and TV industry for a few years now, but I am excited to say I'm back into the novel game. I've actually been working on a novel for a little while now, and I'm going to start dropping it on Amazon's Vella. So if you're on that platform, look me up, Maxwell Alexander Drake. Thank you again for listening, and as always, keep writing.
Hi guys, this is Marie from Releasing Your Inner Dragon, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you're interested in more content on fantasy world building, head over to YouTube and look up Just in Time Worlds. I release tons of content there. If you'd like to check out my book, The Hidden Blade by Marie M. Mullaney, it is available as an ebook, audiobook, and print book on Amazon. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.